What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper video. Today we are going to begin our full Pauper set review for the Phyrexia All Will Be One set. But before we dive into that, let's make sure you guys understand the keywords and some of the new rules mechanics coming to the game. Okay, first off, we have oil counters. Oil counters are a new type of counter that will be placed on permanents and tracked. Think of it like charge counters or energy, similar to those type of effects. These creatures and or machines or artifacts mostly are going to have abilities that require you to spend oil counters to activate. Next up, we have a returning mechanic, Proliferate. For those of you who don't know how this works, I'll give you the exact text, but it is a keyword. It's an action that states choose any number of permanents and or players that have a counter, then give one additional counter of each kind that permanent or player already has. So for each permanent or player you choose, they get an extra counter of every counter they have. You don't get to pick a specific kind of counter to proliferate. Say that this player has a poison and an experience counter, right? Poison is good for you, experience is good for them. If you want to proliferate them, you have to give them both. So keep that in mind. It's a small interaction, but it might be useful to know about. Next up, we have Corrupted. Corrupted is a new keyword that is going to alter cards based on the amount of poison a player has. Corrupted triggers if a player has 3 or more poison counters, specifically an opponent. So you will see spells that have additional effects or better effects if your opponent has 3 or more poison counters. Speaking of poison counters, what are poison counters? Poison counters are a tracked counter on players that are given through Infect, Toxic, some other effects on cards that will just straight up give poison counters. But if a player ever has 10 or more poison counters, they lose the game. Think of this like an emblem. You just track them outside of life totals, and if they ever have 10, they lose. Speaking of ways to give people poison counters, Toxic. Toxic is a new keyword that is replacing Infect from older Phyrexian type sets. Toxic is a static number of poison counters this creature grants during combat. So a Toxic 2 creature, regardless of its power, in combat will deal its regular damage. In addition, it will also grant 2 poison counters. This effect does stack. So if you have a Toxic 2 creature and you give it Toxic 1, it will give 3 poison counters if it hits a player. Keep in mind, this effect does not use the stack. It resolves with damage, similar to Lifelink. It is not a triggered ability. How is this different from Poisonous? If you're familiar with that keyword, I mean, the long and short of it is it's not. Yes, technically, Poison was a triggered ability, so it resolved after damage, but there's not a whole lot of gameplay scenarios in which you're going to need to know that difference. But otherwise, it is the new way to give players poison counters, called For Mirrodin. For Mirrodin is a keyword found on some equipment in the set that creates a 2/2 red rebel creature token when the equipment enters the battlefield and then attaches the equipment to it. So think of this like the new Living Weapon. Living Weapon was an older version of a Phyrexian ability on equipment that made a 0/0 germ token and attached the equipment as it entered play. This is a 2/2 body at standard. So it is more expensive. You'll see a lot of the equipment in this set cost more mana than you would otherwise think they should. But they do come with a 2/2 creature automatically wearing it, so that is something to keep in mind. Alright, there's one last new thing to talk about, which is a new token type called a Phyrexian Mite. These are 1/1 artifact creature tokens that have Toxic 1 and cannot block. Lots of cards are creating these. Sometimes they create it on ETB, sometimes they create it on death, but remember, these cards have Toxic, so they're going to deal combat damage and poison counters, and they can't block, so that's a really important thing to be aware of in this limited. That wraps up all the rules, guys. Let's go ahead and jump right into the color reviews. All right, guys. Joining me as usual is Josh, aka Mayo on the internet. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how you doing, guys?
You ready to dive into these white cards? Let's take a look
Oh boy,
at
howdy.
All Will Be One. I have tried pretty hard to stay away from most spoilers, so this is going to be a blind react to the majority of cards. I've seen one or two slipping through my For You page, but most of these cards I have not read or looked at, so I apologize if I make any mistakes. But we're just going to jump right in. First one is going to be Bascilica Shepard here. And this is a 3/3 Phyrexian Angel for 5, 3 and 2 white. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, it creates 2 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Mite artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. A lot of people were comparing this to Soul of Migration, the 2/4 flying with Evoke that makes 2 1/1 birds. I think this is substantially worse than that card. Tokens not being able to block is a thing that they've liked lately in development for some reason, and I really, really dislike it. Tokens not being able to block is huge. This is a 3/3 for 5, which dies to pretty much any removal spell in the format. It feels bad. I'll be honest. I know a lot of people are excited about this card, but I can't see it being real in competitive. Being in limited, this card's probably quite good. I mean, in theory, it's 5/5 worth of stats for 5 mana, and part of it has flying, and part of it has toxic. But in Pauper constructed, there's no shot this is a good card. What do you think?
No, I agree. This isn't really making it in constructed. Just the tokens not being able to block is really huge.
Yeah, agree. Hard agree. I'm fairly upset that they keep making that design choice. But we'll bump right on here. What's up next? We have Charge of the Mites, which is a 3 mana, 2 and a white instant that says choose one. Charge of the Mites deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. Or create 2 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Mite artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. So again, creatures can't block. That's huge. But dealing damage equal to the number of creatures you control isn't a terrible effect. At instant for 3 mana. I'm not hugely opposed to that. I'm not like into it, but I'm not mad at it. A lot of people are talking that this is like the Phyrexian Raise the Alarm. Again, I think that's a gross over exaggeration. Tokens not being able to block is absolutely critical here, and I really don't like that design decision for these tokens.
Yeah, I think that the not being able to block is not as important on this one, because this just seems like you're only ever playing at end of turn, and because you always want the toxic creatures to be swinging, like you don't ever want to block with them.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, at worst, they're still just 1/1s, right? So, I mean, obviously with like Raise the Alarm, you want to be attacking with the 1/1s more than you want to be blocking. But surprise 2/2 at instant speed isn't bad. And this just kind of takes that versatility off the table for you, which I'm not a fan of. I'd like to be able to use this. I mean, I know that they gave it a mode for defense. Like the whole idea is that like if you would be blocking, you can instead just deal damage to the thing. And if you want to be attacking, you just end of turn it and then attack. But I don't know, man. I really wish that they could block.
Yeah, it would be helpful for this card.
Yeah. Next up is Compleat Devotion. Complete spelled the Phyrexian way. This is a 2 mana instant for a white and a colorless. It says target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If that creature has toxic, draw a card. So we've been talking a lot in the past about these white pump spells. Most of them just need to say draw a card to be good. Sadly, the conditional draw card here I don't think is going to be good enough for Pauper. There just aren't enough really solid toxic cards. And Infect would have to be like a real deck, and I just don't think that's going to happen. If there is an infect deck, it's probably a proliferate deck. It's not a toxic deck, which is hilarious to me, but I think that's just the way the cookie crumbles for the cards that we got for common. I don't like this. Generic +2/+2 for 2 just does not seem on rate enough when you're looking at things like, what was Karametra's protection? What was it?
Yeah.
Like,
The Kenmetri's the blessing, the 1 green,
Blessing.
indestructible,
Yeah.
hexproof, and oh wait, no, Karametra is the one
Karametra's
+2/+2.
is the one that was
It's
+2/+2,
enchantment
and then, yeah, if
and
it's an
stuff.
enchantment, it gets
I
indestructible
was
and
thinking of Johnny's.
hexproof. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. This card's not really exciting, especially because it specifically says toxic. Like
yeah.
if it was something like, if this creature can give your opponent poison counters, like that, to make
I would
retroactive.
honestly rather this have been a corrupted trigger. I would rather
Oh,
this say
nice.
+2/+2 and then corrupted draw a card,
That'd be a little bit better too.
right?
So you're not just
And
completely screwed. Well, you'd still be if you targeted a creature and they killed it.
yeah, but
Mm.
I don't know. Not a fan of this one. I don't think it's on rate enough. Even the cantrip here, I think, is too conditional to be played very often. So gonna pass on this from me. I am
Yeah,
not devoted enough, as it turns out.
this is partial devotion.
Right. All right. Next up is Crawling Chorus, which is a 1/1 Phyrexian horror for 1. Card has Toxic 1, so when it deals combat damage to a player, they also get a single poison counter in this case because it's Toxic 1. And when it dies, you create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Mite artifact creature token with Toxic, and this creature can't block. I'm going to say that phrase a lot because there are a lot of mites and a lot of ways to get mites. I think I might just shorten it and say a Phyrexian Mite going forward without reading the full text block. But I'll let you take the lead on this one. What do you think?
So this one is really just 2 Phyrexian Mites. The first one is just not an artifact and it can block.
Mhm.
It's fine. I mean, playing this on 1 is what you want your toxic creatures so they can swing and actually connect once, and then you proliferate on. This being able to block effectively as well means you're not just completely dead in the water if you draw it later on. And then you do have the option to swing with it with the token anyways. I expect this would be better in like gates, something where you can almost push the creature through because it doesn't have evasion. But yeah, that's really what I'm digging about this guy. Is he's usable. 1/1, 1 mana. He's got okay ability, but the making 2 bodies is really nice.
Yeah, I look
Especially
at this card in comparison to, I think it's Hunted Witness, the 1/1 human that makes a 1/1 vampire lifelink token when it dies. I don't think that Toxic 1 is better than lifelink, but I think they're very similar comparative cards. They're both, 2 1/1 bodies with various keywords for 1 mana in white. I don't know that this replaces Hunted Witness in like the cube, for instance. I think that if there is a toxic deck or if there is a corrupted deck, this card's probably in it. I don't think this card makes the cut in the proliferate deck just because of its color. I think if anything, the proliferate deck is probably going to be like green blue or blue black. I don't think it will be white. So this just kind of falls short on that spectrum for me. But overall, I mean, it's fairly efficient. 2 1/1 bodies for 1 mana is always a decent rate. Wish this was Doom Traveler. Like, could we get the token to have flying, or could the front half have flying and be a backwards Traveler would have been cool. But yeah, I think it's decent. I don't know that it'll be good enough, but reasonable. I'm keeping my eye on it at least. My initial knee jerk was for like mono white heroic here, but I think that like you mentioned, Gates is a really interesting route to take here. I don't like that Toxic doesn't synergize with the pumps from the Gates though, so don't know if that part's going to be relevant. I think in that deck probably Sacred Cat, Squadron Hawk, and like Gingerbread are all still just better one drops. Squadron Hawk's a 2-drop, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think this is possibly good on like the cat, like or in place of the cat, because you don't have to cast it. You do get a second swinger and it does have the toxic that it can initially put on to the opponent. And if you need to, you can use the blue proliferate spells that come later.
Yeah, I think Toxic is almost always just going to be like a way to get Proliferate started. I don't think it's ever going to be the win condition.
Oh, it's never gonna hit
But
for the 10th spot.
yeah, just I don't know. We'll keep an eye on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sold. Next up we have Duelist of Deep Faith. It's 2/2 for 2 mana, a white and a colorless Phyrexian soldier. It has Toxic 1, and as long as it's your turn, it has First Strike. I think this card's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. 2/2 First Strike for 2. I just like completely blank the Toxic, right? Just don't even look at it. And 2/2 for 2 that has First Strike whenever it's attacking is like pretty good.
Yeah, this is I want to say the closest we've gotten to the Porcelain Legionnaire in recent sets.
So I was actually going to compare this to Fresh Faced Recruit, which is a red-white hybrid card that had First Strike as long as it was attacking, I believe, and it was a 2/1 for 2. It was like a colorless and a red-white hybrid. And this is just like a straight better version of that. I mean, yes, it has First Strike while it's attacking, but it has it at any other moment too, just in case that's relevant somehow. I don't think it ever would be, but it is.
On blocking.
On your turn?
Yeah.
Okay. But it is a 2/2 for 2 instead of a 2/1 for 2, so it is just slightly better than that card, although it doesn't have the red versatility that Fresh Faced Recruit had. I'm a pretty big fan of this card. Really don't like the art. Leave my little Myrrh boys alone. But yeah, pretty good card altogether. I don't know that this card has what it takes. But I will say if there is like a red white or like a mono white equipment or white weenie deck that resurfaces, I know it used to be a thing. It's not anymore. But if we have enough to reignite like a mono white equipment or a white red equipment matters deck, this card could almost certainly make the cut in that deck. It's going to wear equipment incredibly well. It's on rate. It has Toxic if you ever need to be able to, set up corrupt cards for whatever reason. And yeah, just 2/2 for 2 with First Strike is pretty solid.
Yeah, something funny to note is if you attack with this creature and they let it through all 10 times, you kill them with both Toxic and with the actual damage.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's an exact even clock.
Yeah, so I will give Watsy a little round of applause for that.
All right, next up is the Flensing Raptor, which is a 2/2 for 3 mana, 2 and a white. It's a Phyrexian bird. We have a lot of Phyrexian birds in this set. I did not think that was a creature type that was going to be popular, but we are. It has flying, it has Toxic 1, and when it enters the battlefield, another target creature you control with Toxic gets 1/1 and flying until end of turn. What do you think about this card?
I think it's got the same problem as that other pump spell for Toxic that we saw earlier, in that it doesn't actually synergize with Toxic. It just has a limitation on what it can target for the 1/1 and flying.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that the restriction is more a downside than a thematic choice. I wish that it just gave like 1/1 flying and Toxic 1.
Yeah. Maybe it didn't even need the 1/1, just flying and Toxic 1 until end of turn. And that makes this card bonkers, like so much better.
Yeah. In general, I will say a 2/2 flying for 3 isn't bad. I mean, Windrake has been played several times in several decks in lots of limited environments and been good. But I think we've kind of passed that now. So does Toxic 1 make up for like the lack of toughness? from like the 2/3 drakes that we've seen for 3 mana popping up here and there. And does this ETB have enough relevance to like make it good? I don't think it does. I
Yeah,
don't think the ETB is good enough, and I don't think that Toxic 1 is a strong enough keyword to carry this card into relevancy.
I completely agree. I don't think toxic itself is a strong enough keyword because it's lacking the actual interaction with creatures like that Infect had.
Yeah.
And it was a real reason to make the creature's base size important. And in this, it's just a wind drake that if you hit them once, then they get a poison counter, and it's a possible build around for a deck, but it's like a theme, not this card.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think that this card might arbitrarily trigger Corrupted, but that's about it.
yeah,
I think like I don't know. I think this has kind of a similar problem to the last Toxic 1 dude, which is like it needs to be good without Toxic. And if it's good without Toxic, then fine, Toxic is a bonus, but Toxic is never going to be the thing that elevates a mediocre creature into good. And this is a mediocre creature.
exactly. Yeah, and then the funny enough, like we were saying earlier, this you have to target a creature with toxic,
Yeah.
but it gives a buff to the creature it's targeting, its power and toughness, so you're probably going to get through
More
to throw off the
damage
clock
than
with
yeah.
damage. Exactly. So you're more so leaning towards I have this creature that has toxic on it, so I can target it with my Flensing Raptor,
Yeah.
so I can kill you with regular damage. And it just feels weird.
Yeah, I will say my biggest issue with Toxic isn't that it's a set damage source. Like, I'm okay with that. I just wish that it still had the -1/-1 counter transition to creatures. I wish that Toxic 1 read that players dealt combat damage by this creature also get a poison counter, and creatures dealt combat damage by this creature also get a -1/-1 counter.
Yeah, for a single one, or for the toxic amount.
For the toxic amount, yeah.
Yeah.
Make it exactly the same as what it does to players. The only difference that I think would have to be done is in order to balance it in combat, it would have to be worded incredibly weirdly to not give extra damage in combat, right? Because a toxic 1/2/2 that had toxic deal -1/-1 counters would be dealing 3 damage effectively, right? It would trade up into a 3/3.
Yes.
So it would have to be worded in the old ways of Infect, where it deals it like instead of dealing combat damage, put a -1/-1 counter on it or something along those lines. I don't know. It would take some balancing. I just really don't like that in their quest to solve the Infect problem, they also made it completely irrelevant in combat.
Yeah, and because you have to make the creatures smaller,
Yeah.
apparently, when we've determined toxic isn't going to make a creature better.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at with the whole toxic part of this.
I mean, I've mentioned it to you previously, but I wish that there were toxic levels that were above the power and toughness of creatures. In every instance, it is either a net even or a net negative, where they deal more combat damage than Infect. I wish that there were 0/1s, or maybe not 0/1s because they can't deal combat damage, but like 1/1s or 1/2s that had Toxic 3, for instance, that cost 2 mana and they were really easy to block, but if they ever got in, they were super venomous or super toxic. Something like that could have been a really interesting design choice, where they made very weak underrate creatures that worked on an accelerated clock because they were effectively dealing 6 damage with 3 poison counters, or that sort of thing. I would have liked that style of toxic a lot more than the style we got, which is like, well, they'll probably die to combat damage first, but you might have 6 poison counters on them. Yeah, I don't. Not a fan of what they did with Toxic. I would have rather just had regular Infect, or I would rather have had some sort of middle ground between Infect and Toxic instead of Toxic being the middle ground,
Yeah, it's because functionally, for me, the only difference between toxic and poisonous is toxic doesn't use the stack. There's not a trigger to
Hmm.
put that poisonous
Yeah, it
counter on
resolves
them.
with combat damage, like lifelink.
Yeah, yeah, but that's not a big enough
No, it's not.
difference.
It's absolutely
It
not.
really isn't. They're just making keywords here. Like, honestly, if you put poisonous one on this creature, on Flensing Raptor, does it change at all?
No, it's completely thematic. The only
Yeah.
reason it's toxic over poisonous is because poisonous is a future sighted keyword that was never like what do they call it now?
Yeah.
Like
Never implemented.
no, like they have a word for it. Used to be evergreen. Now it's like coniferous. Um,
Okay.
where it was never like made permanent. It was just used in a one-off instance as an ability name, and it wasn't meant to ever return in that same form. But
Yeah, it
for
just
all
had to
intents
be
and
the assembly
purposes, this
workers.
is just poisonous. They just called it something different.
Right? And like, I don't want to do Watsu's job and tell them where they could have put poisonous, you know, because I'm not a card designer, but I'm just saying.
No, I think for the set, the word toxic makes sense. But I wish the ability was different enough to poison that it wasn't just a duplicate keyword for the same effect. I am not in favor of frivolous keyword additions. There is already enough of a learning curve and a memory gap for experienced players versus new players where you have so many things to know and so many things to learn and so many keywords to memorize that we don't need words for the same effect. We just keep one word.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's enough on that one.
Well,
What do we
anyways,
have
Flensing
next?
Raptor, ladies and gentlemen.
Next up is our first for Mirrodin card. It's Goldwarden's Helm. It's a 3 mana equipment for 2 and a white. It has 4 Mirrodin, which means that it enters the battlefield with a 2/2 rebel attached to it. And this gives +0/+1, and it has a white colorless equip cost. So this is a 2/3 for 3 that you can then equip across after the token dies, or you can just leave the 2/2 token and equip it over.
Mm-hmm.
My initial thoughts on this card is why does it have white in the equip cost? I absolutely hate it when they do that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
by all means, put mana costs in the or put color associations in the mana cost if you really want to like key this into a faction or a flavor or a style of magic card. But stop putting colored mana costs in equips. Like, one, it holds no thematic ground at all. There is no reason to draw white mana to move a piece of metal from one thing to another. Um, you could have done like the what was it? Like the Drosforge helmet or no, what was it? Cranial plating? There was an old equipment that would attach for a colored mana but equip for colorless mana.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, but it was cranial plating
Um
when it was in Affinity and
and
stuff.
yeah, and for those that don't know the difference between equip and attach is you can attach at instant speed. Um and so that gave reason for it to cost colored mana. But this just costing colored mana to equip is a huge downside for me, and I hate it when they do this. I will say for Mirrodin is an interesting take on Living Weapon, which is the old version that we got in New Phyrexia and Mirrodin Besieged, which was to make a 0/0 germ and then equip that to the equipment. This having a baseline 2/2 body instead of a 0/0 makes it significantly better, but it obviously costs a whole lot more. I mean, this is an equipment that gives +0/+1 and costs 3 mana and 2 to equip. Like that is a rate that is astronomically higher than would be playable in any other instance, except the fact that this comes with a 2/2 on it already. So it counts as like a creature slot, not an equipment slot. And then the secondary equip to put it on other stuff is just marginal upside if you have extra mana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I don't.
I don't
I like.
hate it, but I don't love it either. This seems very meh, like super mid to me.
Yeah, I think that they could have shifted the power a little bit, like make it a 1/1 creature. Give the equipped creature +1/+2, equip for 1 or 2 colorless, and there's nothing wrong with this card at that point.
Well,
But
so I
I'm never
think
moving this over to another creature to give up. plus O plus
I
1.
I agree.
And
I
no.
think this should baseline be 1/1, and it should be a 3/3 for 3 with equip 2.
Mhm.
That would be perfectly fine with me. This having a color association is already a big turnoff, and then it only buffing 1 toughness for 2 mana seems way higher than I want to pay. Let's see. Moving right along, we have Incisor Glider. Man, this card is wild, and the artwork's crazy in this set. There's so much body horror. Complete side note, but if you haven't seen it, there is like a Pokemon evolution stage that gets to God, what is it, like Phyrexian it's not Inquisitor. What's the like opposite Phyrexian Obliterator? The white one?
Oh, there's a white one?
Yeah, Phyrexian like Adjudicator or something. It's Elish Norn's version of Phyrexian Obliterator, which is absolutely hilarious. But basically, there is a common, which is Incisor Glider, and then there is an uncommon, which is a 4-winged toothed thing. And then there is the new Phyrexian Obliterator in white that is a 6-winged like toothy thing, and it's a hilarious little like Pokemon evolution train that got posted on Twitter, and I laughed about it. Um, but anyway, Incisor Glider is a 1/3 for 1 and a white, 2 mana total. It's a Phyrexian construct with flying, and it has Corrupted. Whenever it attacks, if they have 3 or more poison counters, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. All creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This card's pretty okay. I mean, I'm in favor of attack triggers that pump the team with an already evasive body. This gives me like Signal Pest vibes. I think my biggest issue with this is that Corrupted and Toxic are on different cards. There is no instance of a Toxic card with Corrupted that gets better if it's hit them a few times, and that's a huge miss for me. Like, why should my single card's individual power be reliant on me doing some other side quest that's not even part of this card? I'm not a fan of how they handled the keywords in this set, I'll say it. For Mirrodin, seems like it's inflating costs too high, and it didn't need to be a 2/2. Corrupted seems super conditional, and it seems like it's rewarding a goal that is actively not what you want to be doing to win the game. And Toxic is a poor midway point between Infect and where we should have gone. From Infect when they wanted to fix the keyword. It's such a big fail for me with the abilities from this set. And the tokens can't block. Like, it's just that being said, if we evaluate this from a ceiling perspective, like if this attacks and they always have 3 poison counters, this card's bonkers. But if it attacks and they never have 3 poison counters, is this card still good? And the answer's it's okay. Like, if you take Corrupted off this card entirely and it's just a 1/3 for 2 artifact creature token with flying, is it good? No. Is it okay? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like this better than the Flensing Raptor. Because it
Definitely.
seems more in line with modern style of card quality. And it's a 1/3 flyer for 2. It can live against the Flensing Raptor. It can still push damage though. So this card, I do like how it has some inkling of like, hey, we're still trying to make good cards, but Corrupted just seems like their way of drawing it back.
Yeah, and for reference, I mean, when this does trigger Corrupted, it attacks as a 2/4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, that's not nothing, especially on a 2-drop. Like, that's
Yeah.
very above rate. So if there is, and we've already seen some toxic cards in white, like, I think overall you're going to have to run bad cards to make good cards better, but does it break even as a positive, or does it, you know, where does the actual payoff versus cost line lie? And I don't know yet. I don't know if toxic cards are good enough to run just to make corrupted cards playable. But this card is like borderline playable even without corrupted. So if you ever can trigger corrupted, this card's very good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean maybe the 2/2 with first strike that just had toxic is like good enough that you run it on its own, and then sometimes you just build into corrupted, and then this card's nuts. Um, I think that if this card is good, it will be next to like the blue draw card that gives poison counters and proliferate stuff like Thrumming Bird, because this card with proliferate with like some 1/1 counters, like you can get a squad really big really fast.
Yeah, like if you had a way of consistently putting them at 3 poison counters,
Mm-hmm.
and that was all you need with this, and this guy can replace the oh shoot, the +2/+0 effects
Mm-hmm.
in certain decks. But not necessarily the Boros one that wants to cast it from the
Yeah,
graveyard.
Rally the Peasant's pretty good, but
Yeah, but if you're trying to run something like Trumpet Blast, right? Like this card replaces that every time. If you can
yeah,
trigger.
I'm interested in seeing this as like a borderline replacement option for like Guardian's Pledge in the as a mono white finisher. I just don't know that you have a way to get corrupted active consistently. I think that's what's gonna really need to be determined. If you're able to trigger corrupted consistently, this card's very good. If corrupted is a side quest that takes like 5 cards and a bunch of effort and a bunch of mana to like make happen, this card's not good enough to make corrupted worth it.
Yeah, I agree. And there's something that we aren't going to see in white here, but there is a card, at least one, that gives poison counters without needing to hit them with a toxic creature. And I think that's going to be the linchpin of triggering corrupted at least.
I
Whatever is
agree.
aggressively toxic.
All right. Next up we have Indoctrination Attendant, which is a 3/4 for 4, 3 and a white Phyrexian cleric with toxic 1. And when it enters the battlefield, you may return another permanent you control to its owner's hand. If you do, create a mite. See, this is kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about them making toxic levels that are always either on par or lower than the inherent power of the creature. Right? This is literally, it only has toxic to trigger corrupted, but it doesn't have corrupted. And it's not good enough to get corrupted on its own. So like you have to put several card slots into triggering corrupted. And then when you get that, you need a whole other set of cards that get marginally better because of it. Like I wish that toxic and corrupted were on the same cards. I wish that it said, hey, here's a card that starts out fairly weak. It's got toxic, but after you get a couple of successful hits in, the card gets better, right? It grows as the toxic level of your opponent goes up. Or it starts to attack better, or it pumps your team. It's the quest and the goal in the same card. I don't like this whole, you have a quest and you have a goal and they're not related at all.
Yeah. I'm on the same line with that. The only other way that I can think of making it playable, right, is if you have whatever triggers like the corrupted, right?
Mhm.
That works off poison counters, so it works off of infect as well. But there needs to be more than just one other keyword or other ability in the whole history of Magic that it interacts with favorably.
Yeah.
Like Metalcraft, you can build decks very easily and slide artifacts in at little to no cost. And you
Now,
actively benefit from that.
what I would have liked to see corrupted be, instead of what it currently is like devotion for toxic. If we had like corrupted 2, corrupted 5, corrupted 6, and then it triggered an ability if you had enough creatures with toxic out, I could see that being a thing. Because it would give you incentive to build a critical mass of toxic, right? You could mass your 1/1 mites, you could really commit to it, and it had nothing to do with your, or maybe it counts counters on the opponent too. I don't know how you want to balance it, right? But I would like, if Toxic is going to be purposefully bad at giving people poison counters with the intention of it triggering Corrupted, why not just cut out the middleman and have Toxic only be cared about by the Corrupted keyword, and it just checks your board for how many things have that keyword? I don't know. It feels like they could have gone a couple different ways, and they went the worst way that I can think of. But in either case, this card isn't bad. A lot of people are talking about it in the same breath as Skyfisher, which I think is blasphemy. Of course, Skyfisher is miles better than this card. But it's similar.
It's, yeah, right?
It has a lot of the same words in the text box, but it's not good.
Yeah, I think this is a nice card that you wouldn't hate blinking, but if you're going to be blinking specifically for the effect of Toxic, you're blinking the Angel from above, like
Yeah,
that first
definitely.
thing we looked at.
The 5-drop.
Yeah, this I've played decks that have multiple like white mainline effects in them, and that feels so awful. Like you never want more than 6 of this effect.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be what would you say, Skyfisher 5 and 6, and even then I'd still probably play the Lion first.
Yeah,
like,
not for 4 mana. I'm not playing.
Yeah.
I'm not paying 4 mana to bounce my own thing. That seems bad. Yeah. All right. Next up is our first Cat Rebel, our first Leonin. God, it's good to see them. I miss them from Mirrodin. We have Leonin Lightbringer, which is a 3/2 for 3 mana, which is a reasonable rate. It's got 2 and a white. It's a Cat Rebel, as I mentioned. It has Ward 2, which is just a great line of text on a common. And then it says, as long as it's equipped, it gets +1/+1. So we're getting into that like equipment matters kind of Mirrodin style rebel sub theme that they're building here. Red is the other color included in the kind of equipment matters rebel sub theme. Big fan of things that care about being equipped. I was a huge fan of the, what was it, like the Kite
like
Hunter.
Sky Hunter Cub and stuff.
Yeah, Sky Hunter Cub and things like that. Where they just got better if they had equipment on them.
Yeah, they all got 1/1, and then they got
something
other
else.
too,
First strike, flying,
vigilance.
I wish this got a keyword, but it already has a keyword, so I'll take it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, not mad that this has Ward 2. I'm a little mad that this is a 3-drop. I wish it was a 2-drop, like 2/1 or 2-drop 2/2. I think it would be significantly better, but not super upset about this card. I like it. Like I said, if there is an Equipment Matters deck, I think this goes in it. This card is quite good as far as holding equipments goes, because that Ward 2 goes a long way to defending itself from removal in response. Pretty big fan of this card.
Yeah, I love the design space on this. It seems to take combine the new in Ward and the old of the
the
+1/+1 that we were speaking of from Mirran. Yeah, from Mirrodin original. I also like that it's got that type lane of Rebel, because I mean, I do think we need more Rebels to make a Rebel deck work.
Oh yeah, no, there's no shot Rebels are around yet in Constructed, but I like where your head's at. Keeping a lookout for relevant creature types, and Rebel is certainly a relevant creature type.
It absolutely is. So, I mean, this card is probably going to be played more in like a deck that is centered around like warriors, but you know, the Cat Rebel Bear is still good.
Right. Yeah, definitely. All right. Next up, we have probably the biggest hype card in white for Constructed Pauper, at least from other people. We have Mandible Justiciar. Man, this card looks absolutely horrific. It is a 2/1 for 2, a white and a colorless artifact creature, Phyrexian Cleric. It has lifelink, and it says whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it gets 1/1 until end of turn. What do you think of this guy?
So this was not to spoil anything, but there's serious talk for this being my my best in show for white.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the cost on him. I like that he's got a little that sneaky keyword in there of lifelink
Mm-hmm.
and also artifact and also cleric,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got the right body size. Also, the pump when another artifact enters is um pretty good. This guy's gonna be swinging for 4 more often than we'd like to admit.
Yeah, it is. It is very relevant that it just says artifact, not artifact creature.
Yeah.
Because I am looking to slam this and follow it with a clowning around.
Yeah.
and go like real hard, because you can get into some wacky scenarios with clowning around tokens, treasure tokens being made. There's definitely some instant speed ways to pump this guy with artifacts that are not irrelevant. Deadly Dispute making a token at instant speed. There's the gate you can tap to make a treasure at instant speed. There's definitely some ways to pump this dude in response, which is super relevant and you need to be aware of. I don't know if this is enough to make mono white affinity a thing like people think it is. I also don't know if this is enough to push people to play white in affinity. But it's definitely powerful. I don't know where it goes yet, but this is gonna go somewhere. This is probably the most playable white card we've seen thus far, although I will say, I don't think it's good enough to be played in Pauper. I think that it's got a lot of really cool things on it, but I don't think we have the support that this needs, and it having 1 toughness is super rough. I just think this is in a bad color. If this was a black artifact creature, it would be substantially better and much more likely to see play in Pauper. But as a white card, there's not enough draw in white. There's not enough artifact generation in white for this to really kind of push the envelope. And I think that to be played in constructed Pauper these days, you gotta be pushed.
Yeah. Yeah, but a slight counter argument there is if they never print good cards into white, then it's actually just never going to get better. They need to print better white cards or more better white cards than they do for other colors for I want to say the next like 5 or 6 sets.
Definitely
to be more.
Yeah, my problem is I don't think this is a better white card. The power of this card relies on synergy, and white doesn't have the synergies to support it. So they printed a card that is reliant on the power of the color it's in, and the color it's in is bad. Specifically at what it wants to do, which is making artifacts. I think that there is room for this card to get substantially better over, a set or two if they start printing some artifact token generation in white. Like, if we get like what was the shrine that made Myrrh tokens out of like Scars of Mirrodin, right? If we get like a downshift of that card, or we get a couple of like efficiently costed instant speed artifact generators, or something like that, then all of a sudden this card can spike very high in power level and it can be quite good. But as it stands, this card's relying on white to make a bunch of artifacts for its power, and white can't do that well.
I agree.
I like where you're at. Like
other artifacts, like just pure colorless artifacts that do well with making other.
Sure.
So that can supplement white's lack, but it doesn't make up for white's lack of draw.
Yeah, and that's a problem. I do. So we talked about like the absolutely like bonker starts you can have with like the Phalanx dude, the 2-drop that gets 1/1 whenever an artifact enters play.
Yep.
And this and that do exactly the same thing, right? The only difference is this has lifelink and has 1 toughness. The other dude had like vigilance and was a 2/2, right? But the problem is that card didn't see any play either. Even though people were hyped about it and we were talking about all the bonkers starts you could have. And if that card didn't see any play whatsoever, like people didn't even talk about it being possible to build around, then I don't see this as being substantially better than that. I think it's very close to the same card, and it's very close to the same power level. And if one had no shot of being playable, I don't think the other one does either. This has one upside over that card, which is it itself is an artifact, so duplicates do trigger each other, but I don't think that's enough to push it. White not drawing any cards to really go deep on like the combo style of just like storm out, drop a shit ton of artifacts, and swing for the win. It doesn't exist in white. And mass token generation on a repeatable effect doesn't exist in white. So, I mean, we have Clowning Around, which is great for this card. We don't have really anything else. And as far as like generic artifacts go, the majority of artifacts that are being put into play are either affinity for artifacts on like Mirran Enforcers, right? Or I guess you could say Frogmite. They're lands, or they're from black cards. Blood Fountain, Deadly Dispute are generating more artifacts than the majority of the rest of Pauper. So I just think this card's in the wrong color. I think if it was a black card, it would be substantially better.
Yeah, I think it'd be substantially better right away.
Right now. Yeah, like I said, room to grow. In the future, this card could spike very, very high in power level just because, you know, all of a sudden they downshift a shrine that makes like a bunch of artifact creature tokens at the same time. They give us a couple of instant speed artifact creature generations. Maybe we get like a white Deadly Dispute kind of variant where it's to sacrifice an artifact or a creature and then it does something and makes an artifact creature token. Like imagine like an Innistrad themed Deadly Dispute that was like sacrifice an artifact or a creature, gain life equal to its CMC, and then make like 2 clues or something, like, you know, that sort of thing. Would it be as good as Deadly Dispute? Of course not, but that's kind of the direction that we need to see white take for this to start picking up steam, I think.
Yeah.
Or just give us like a Battle Screech that makes artifact birds, and then we're in business immediately.
Yeah. You know what? I can tell you which one that I expect will happen first.
Right. But at least white Deadly Dispute would be white card draw, so definitely going to print the Battle Screech first.
Of course. I mean, white card draw, that's never going to happen. It's going to be like, you draw 1 card, your opponent draws 3.
Yeah.
Sorcery speed, 4 mana.
Uh-huh.
Double white.
Yeah, and you can only play 1 a turn.
Per game.
Right, it's legendary.
It's going to be limited to deck size, yeah.
Alright, moving right along. We need to shuffle out here. We have Mirran Bardiche, which is a 5 mana equipment. Jesus, that's a lot for an equipment. It has 4 Mirrodin, so it comes into play with a 2/2 red rebel token attached to it. It does cost 4 and a white, so again, there's a white color requirement for this equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+1 and has Vigilance. And equip, again, costs white mana for some reason, and it costs 4 to equip, 3 and a white. Eesh. So this is a 4/3 with Vigilance for 5, which is below rate than we have seen several times recently. 4/4 Vigilance for 5 is like right where they like to put it. But this does have like an equipment that just lies on the ground after the creature dies, and 4 mana to give +2/+1 and Vigilance is like pretty close. If we look at like Sickle Slicer, which was +2/+2 for 4 to equip, or was it 3 to equip? Maybe it was 3 to equip.
For Sickle Slicer, that wasn't one of the living weapons.
It was the 3-drop one. That made it was +2/+2.
Oh man, that I want to say that was 3, but it could have shared.
It was 3 to cast, but it could have been 4 to equip.
In
either case, I think that 2/1 and Vigilance is below rate than we've seen on equips previously, and it's a color requirement. Stop it! Why do I have to pay color associated mana to equip a a random piece of metal to my creature. Just hand them a weapon, they can pick it up. It's not that hard.
It's because, as you can tell, white mana is in this set for the Mirran defenders, and this way it's preventing all of the Phyrexians from equipping it.
But
It's just don't even.
all right.
It's not worth deconstructing.
Yeah. All right. Moving right along.
Yeah.
Orthodox Enforcer is a 2/4 Phyrexian cleric for 4 mana, 3 and a white. It has vigilance and it gets +2/+0 as long as you control 2 or more artifacts. So this is a 4/4 vigilance for 4 if you have artifacts on the board. This card seems deceptively good. I don't think you can afford to pay 4 mana for a creature that's just going to die to a cast down or a Galvblast in constructed Pauper. But in like limited, this card's pretty good. In cube, there's not enough artifacts to really make this pop off, but in like Phyrexian limited, this card will be very good.
Yeah,
like, this will be a 4/4 for 4 a lot.
Oh yeah, you'll want like 2 or 3 of these in your deck in limited.
Yeah. Especially because it has vigilance. It can block all the stupid mites.
Yeah, and not suffer any ill effect, even though they are toxic.
Yep.
But yeah, a good card. Even just paying 4 mana for a 2/4 with vigilance is fine.
Reasonable.
It's similar to Giant Spider.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then the +2/+0 for better craft here.
Yep.
Then you're doing pretty nice.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, next up.
Go ahead.
I do want to question the whole slightly better metalcraft on a Phyrexian card.
Yeah,
I would expect this to be.
I mean, it's not.
Again.
It is slightly better metalcraft, isn't it? All right. Yeah, I'm not going to question it. Let's see. Next up, we have
Planar Disruption.
Yeah, we have probably my favorite white card of the set, which is Planar Disruption. It is a 2 mana aura for a white and a colorless. You get enchanted artifact, creature, or planeswalker. Enchanted permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. Now, I would have paid actual money to have them stample enchantment onto those types. Little sad about that. But this card's great. Like, this card is so good. Like, we have not seen an on-rate upgrade to pacifism ever. Like, I maybe we have the shadow one that has flash. What was it? Planar. So we did have temporal isolation, which was close. I would wager to say it's like parallel to pacifism. So I okay, fine. I'll give you temporal isolation as a possible upgrade to pacifism in the past. But this is the best one we've seen by a mile. This is so good.
Yeah. Expanding what it can target is
huge.
Alone an upgrade. But then you also just make it a rest for 1 less mana.
And they left off a very important other than mana abilities clause. So, people are going to be targeting bridges with this.
Yeah. I do have one quick question for you regarding what you said earlier. When you said you wanted it to be able to enchant an enchantment as well.
Yeah.
What enchantments are you worried about?
Pestilence.
With abilities?
I want this to turn off Pestilence.
It seems pretty narrow, because I was thinking the only things that it would target were other enchantments that hit creatures, like Presence of Gond,
I mean, sure, but Presence of Gond gives its ability to the creature. I was looking at global enchantments, like Fires of Yavimaya would be a good one. Like the there were a bunch of enchantments that have activated abilities to pump or have activated abilities to put 1/1 counters on stuff. There's Pestilence. I mean, in Pauper, in the cube specifically, there's Pestilence only. But in Magic's history, there are lots of enchantments with activated abilities. I wish this could target those two.
That's fair.
But that's real slim and real nitpicky. That's me trying to find a problem with this card. This card is great. Now, that being said, it's not good enough to see play in Pauper.
That's fair.
We just like we have O-Ring, we have Journey to Nowhere. I just I don't see this being played over either of those. Although I suppose if there is a format in which you're not worried about enchantments, you could absolutely run this over O-Ring. But I think that O-Ring's versatility is going to trump this just a little bit, even for one more mana.
Yeah, I would say the biggest problem that this card has is the same that Pacifism has.
Yeah, it leaves it
Well,
on the
one of
board.
things. Exactly.
Mhm.
So this is just completely hosed by the color black at all. Because if you're playing that, you're playing Deadly Dispute.
Well, and you know, any of the like what is it?
Well, red as well. If you makeshift munitions.
Well, I was going to say like the white things that just give protection also cuz you'll just make the aura fall off, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean I don't think it will see play in Pauper, but this card is a slam dunk for the cube and is such a strong upshift in power level for like the white in aura removal we've seen in the past. Like this is up there with Journey to Nowhere and O-Ring for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. This and the flash enchantment that for 2 where you exile a tapped creature.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So get these in your draft decks. Get these in your not constructed, but in your sealed decks. If you have them,
I will be
playing.
windmill slamming this into the cube.
Yeah.
And I love that it turns off Pristine Talisman. We needed more things that can deal with that card.
Oh, it does, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
I'm even more of a fan of this card now.
Right? All right. Next up we have
red.
Sinew Dancer. It does not. Now, next up we have Sinew Dancer, which is a 1/1 Phyrexian soldier for 1 white. It has 4 mana, 3 and a white, tap target creature. And then for Corrupted, it turns into white tap target creature. This is awful.
Well, tell me what you really feel.
This card is awful. Like it is so bad. Like we have several variations of regular tapper creatures that are substantially better than this and don't care about Corrupted. They have no hoops to jump over. It's just a 1/1 white 1-drop. Like why does this have so many hoops to jump through? Like this should have started out as 1 white mana tap target creature, and then for Corrupted, 1 white mana tap 2 target creatures. Like Corrupted is going to be near impossible to achieve outside of Limited. Nobody cares about Corrupted, bro. Like, and if anything was going to help you get Corrupted, it's tapping a creature. Why do I have to pay 4 mana to do it? Not a fan of this card. This card's bad.
Yeah, I agree. This card is it's a case study in what not to do for a tapper when you're trying to push damage or trying to prevent damage.
Yeah.
It's just not where you want to be.
Give me Gideon's Lawkeeper any day. Moving on.
Yep.
We have Vanish into Eternity. This is a really interesting card. 3 mana, so a 2 colorless and a white for an instant that says it costs 3 more to cast if it targets a creature. Exile target non-land permanent. What? This card's really good. Like, the first time I read this card, I thought I was reading it wrong. Like, instant exile target non-land permanent. For 3 mana. Just non-creature non-land permanent. Which is relevant, but, like, still very good.
Yeah.
And then it has an additional mode where for 6 mana, you can exile target creature. And it's an instant. Like, the best version of that we have currently in Pauper is a 5-mana sorcery. And that only targeted creatures. This card's great. This card is so much better than any variant of this effect White has had in Pauper ever. Like, for 3 mana, this is an instant O-Ring that they can't disenchant later.
Yeah.
And then for 6 mana, this is just an instant speed kill anything in White, which White doesn't have. White's interaction is horrible. That's why every constructed deck runs 4 Journey to Nowheres.
Yeah.
This card's very good.
Second color.
I think that this is most likely to see Pauper play for me. I don't know if this will be a 4 of, but it will certainly be like a 2 of out of a lot of white boards. And it might even make the cut in main as a 1 or 2 of in some decks. Like, if you want to, if you don't need to deal with creatures and you get blown out by, like, you know, makeshift munitions or pestilence or like, I don't know. This card's pretty good. This seems like a very strong sideboard option against things like Tron, against things like what else?
Anything that doesn't require creatures to kill you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just struggling to find, like, real competitive ways to use this card, but it seems versatile enough that I'm sure there's something. I will say that it's really sad that they're killing Elspeth again.
No. She's not dying.
Oh, no, she's
just going away for a little bit.
She's going away forever.
Well, like, if you want to take the card literally.
This is straight up, you don't come back from this type of death. But what makes it upsetting for me is that if you've paid attention to the Phyrexian All Will Be One storyline at all, she is... Alright, any day now, buddy. She is invalidating Jace's death by doing this. The storyline, Jace activates the Silerex, or Slyrex, however you pronounce that stupid thing, to destroy the plane of New Phyrexia before the realm breaker travels through the planar gate, right before Jace loses his mind to the collective before he's completed. He activates it as like a last-ditch effort. Like, if I fall, the Gatewatch is gone. Nothing protects the multiverse. I'm detonating the bomb. We have to stop this. And Elspeth, as her nobler than thou self, absorbs the blast into herself to save a bunch of innocent planes, but to save New Phyrexia. Like, I know she didn't intentionally save New Phyrexia, but it does. It's gonna save New Phyrexia. Which lets Jace's sacrifice be completely in vain. That means the Praetors have completed Jace, which means the Gatewatch has officially fallen now that they have Jace, Nissa, and Elspeth is gone. All that's left is Chandra and Liliana. Liliana's in hiding on Strix, and Chandra is doing Chandra things, I guess. So, like, there's nothing to stop them anymore. The Cyrex was all we had to detonate the plane and, like, wipe them out, and Elspeth is just gonna say no, I guess.
Yeah, so what you're telling me is Elspeth was the real Phyrexian sleeper agent.
No kidding! Like, she couldn't have helped them more if she tried!
like, all right, I'm gonna do this one solid for you guys. But you gotta
Right.
promise not to invade any other worlds
Yeah, and
anymore.
I won't be
Right.
here to make sure you hold that promise. So you got to mean
Right.
it.
Yeah. You're the only people who's listened and heard this promise.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trusting you.
code
I'm
of
trusting you.
honor.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Phyrexians have
Strap high
always been
now.
people of their word, right? Um yeah, all
Yeah,
right.
people.
So what else you got for this? Any thoughts? I'm really impressed with this card. I think this card probably the most playable card in white.
No, I think this is really nice. Being able to uh if no, there's a small caveat. If your deck can handle it, like if you have other creature specific removal or other removal, I think this fits in over the O-rings that the decks
Sure.
that white
Yeah, yeah,
would be playing.
yeah. Hmm.
But
So like
you
in Boros
do need,
Synthesizer where they run like
yeah, yeah,
four journeys and two O-rings or something, you would play this over the O-rings.
exactly.
Fair enough. I don't
Um,
know that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling. The more I think about it, the less I am finding are like relevant good targets that you want to cast this on. But in theory, I really like this card.
mhm.
All right. Last but not least, we have Zealot's Conscription. Sorry, Zealot's Conviction. It is a 1 mana enchantment aura with flash. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and corrupted if if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. Enchanted creature gets an additional +1/+0 and has first strike. So, I guess what I'm saying is
I'm waiting for it.
4 mana a few cards ago was the rate for +2/+1 and vigilance. And you're telling me now that 1 white at instant speed is the rate for 2/1 and first strike.
Well, I mean, corrupted allowing.
Yeah, but but 2/1 and first strike, which is a better keyword than vigilance, at instant speed
Yep.
versus 2/1 and vigilance at sorcery speed, and there's a 3 generic mana difference. That's wildly misevaluated. Corrupted is
Yeah.
not worth 3 mana. It might be worth 12 mana. Corrupted might be
Corrupted.
terrible, but if corrupted
Corrupted
is
is 0 mana
if you can
included.
if you can trigger corrupted with any amount of consistency, this card is crazy good.
Yes. Um, I really, really despise that you need poison counters on them to get the additional +1/+0, which I guess if this is on a toxic creature helps you get more poison counters on them, but you're going to be killing them that much faster with combat damage.
Yes, I know. It's counterintuitive. I hate it
It's
too.
I don't understand. Why not corrupted toxic one added on top of that?
Yeah,
Like,
I no
why not
idea. I
accelerate talk on that?
genuinely hate that there is not a card in which corrupted and toxic exist in tandem. It is
It's
it doesn't make any sense. Thematically, the abilities are linked and there is no card that links them. It drives me crazy. Anyway, that is it for all the white cards. I'll be honest, not a whole lot here. Couple of 2 drops that seem okay. A reasonable removal spell that is by no means Path to Exile. Don't call it that. People have. Um, and yeah, I'm just not impressed. Not impressed with white from this set. There's a couple of reasonable cards, but nothing really pushed enough to like blip the radar, you know?
yeah, nothing that's making me want to build around it.
Yeah.
But cards to look out for: Mandible Justiciar or Justiciar, Duelist of Deep Faith, I guess, and Bascilica Shepard. but those last two are really just scraping the bottom of the barrel trying to find other suggestions. It's
Well, I
really
like the
Mandible Justiciar.
glider. The glider is probably the one to look out for the most.
Oh yeah, glider. Flying is real nice.
And pumping the team is very, very strong. So
It's also an artifact.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's probably my like most notable card for white right now, with very little reflection. I think that's probably the best card in white that we talked about today. But let us know in the comments below if you guys disagree with any of our evaluations. Maybe you think we got something wrong. Let us know, what was your favorite card. What are the card? I mean, if you have something you're gonna build around or you're super hyped about, what are you gonna play it with? Let us know down below in the comments. All right, guys, and now for everyone's favorite part of the end of the video. Yes, it is time to do the giveaway. This week's winner is going to be Philip Semlinger. Sorry if I butcher your name. 2220. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the videos, my dude. I really do appreciate you. I'll tag you in the comments below, but go ahead and reach out to me on any social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it doesn't matter. Hit me up and we will get your contact information and get you a set of the foil tokens sent out. Congratulations, man. Thank you so much for everybody's support on the channel. We will keep doing these giveaways as we keep growing. I hope you enjoyed this week's video and the review of the white cards for Phyrexia All Will Be One. As usual, guys, go ahead and leave a comment for the algorithm, like the video, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already so you can keep track of all the rest of the updates as they come out. They will be coming out pretty quickly. Want to make sure we get all of those out before the set release so you guys are ready to draft. And as usual, guys, goodbye forever unless I see you next time.